Catus Maximus here, talking about ratchets again. This time it's a Powr-Kraft, and I used to call these a 66 just because it had that number, and then of course the part number. Comfort grip, half-inch drive ratchet. I've since learned a little bit, at least when it comes to the 66. For a few videos I've talked about this Powr-Kraft 66 3/8 inch breaker bar. Well, I found another one. I was like, oh goodness, what's the likelihood of finding another one of the same units? But this is a 56. It has the very same part number, except for the fact that we can see on the 56, which is on my left here, we can see that it's just a little bit thinner than on the 66. These buckles on the 66 are just a little bit wider, and so it seems to be just a newer and slightly improved generation. So you may end up finding 56 series. And this is kind of the missing link. We have the Powr-Kraft 100 series. These I think were made by Indestro, and these I think were the nicest of the Powr-Kraft ratchets. Not perfect, only a single pawl, but fine tooth, like it's 60 tooth. I had also talked about this basic series, and we can see how the logo is quite a bit different. I think this Powr-Kraft was right near the end, right near where Montgomery Ward was starting to go out of business, and they started making them a lot cheaper. So this is kind of a missing link ratchet. As far as the ball detent, pretty good. Even though it's old and kind of stiff, still works totally reliably. So there's something to be said about that. And it has an interesting design. You can see they have this kind of collar in there, but we'll see what that's all about. This is also a comfort grip, which were not very common back in whenever this was made, probably 60s, 70s, 80s, something like that. There certainly were comfort grip ratchets, but they were not the norm, and it seems these days half the ratchets sold are comfort grips. I think this is nylon, like Estwing hammer handles, because we can see that it's pretty chewed up. They do have a W, I believe that's for Ward. They've been pounding on something, so it does have quite a bit of damage on the end, but nonetheless, it's held up pretty good. It is oval shaped, so it's ergonomic, and what I have also noticed is that it stayed relatively aligned with the head of the ratchet, so pretty interesting. Comfort grips, for some people, they are more comfortable. I do admit that, and if you have to work with your bare hands, and if you're doing roadside service as a tow truck driver, any of that type of stuff, where you may be working in cold weather, this can be definitely very handy because it doesn't conduct the heat quite as well. This ratchet isn't perfect. We can see that some of the chrome has started to flake and stuff, but overall, it's okay. So anyway, let's knock this thing apart, give it a quick lube, take a look at what's inside. As many other ratchets are. Well, my visitor's already leaving. Just get a little screwdriver or something just to try to pop the little end of the spiral retaining ring. And as soon as you get it going, you kind of get the driver around, pry it up a little bit, and once you get it started, you can just get it with your fingers and just work your way around. And you just reverse the process, just start one edge and work your way around when you're reassembling it. We can definitely see it's a bit dirty in here. Definitely not as fine, I think, as the 100 series, but overall not the worst. We can see inside it is just a single pawl mechanism. This ring is just the upper portion of this solid part, and just a regular old SK design, although I will admit that this 66 has 4 teeth on it, so it does offer quite a bit of traction, and I can see why it's still working and not slipping. One thing I've since learned from taking apart a broken Napa roundhead ratchet that had twin pawls is the real second reason for 2 pawls isn't just more traction to prevent slipping, but that these pawls are rocking back and forth on a little pin. You pull out this, to rebuild these, really you have to get in there with a little screwdriver, push down the detent, and then try to work the reverse lever out. That will expose a hole which you can tap out the pin that holds the rocking arm. That pin, as you can tell, is not as thick as this half-inch square, and it turns out in many single pawl round head ratchets that pin is actually what fails. It actually will just shear it off on both sides. So if you have two pawls, you have the loads offset to two pins, and that's what really makes them physically stronger. Is the weak point is this pin on the pawl. And why single pawl ratchets, even though they're round head ratchets, are good, I don't think any of them will really stand up to the type of torque test that a lot of pair heads do, just because of the nature of the pair head. The pawl isn't relying on the pin. It's getting wedged within the body of the ratchet, and that's one of the reasons pair heads are so strong over round heads. So just did want to make that little comment. Okay, got this all back together. Seems to sound pretty good. Certainly runs much better when it's lubed. And not a lot else to say. It's not a bad little Powr-Kraft ratchet. I do like how it sounds. That is a nice sound. And as far as the anvil play, I'd say it's okay, but not great. Round heads tend to have looser play, which has also always been a kind of a issue with them. And that's generally speaking. Some round heads are very tight, and I do make comments about that, but for the most part, round heads do tend to have a little bit looser anvils than their pair head counterparts. And that's just due to I guess it's quite expensive to really make sure that they get the machining on the thickness of the ratchet head nice and proper. So anyway, just want to do a little video about that, about this old Comfort Grip Powr-Kraft ratchet, and how this is one of those tools that wasn't the best when it came out or now. But as far as somebody buying it and using it, it was be totally reliable, more than good enough to get most of their work done. Very few people are actually putting such long cheater bars and hammering on their ratchets so much that the inherent weakness of round heads becomes a real issue. And kind of think it was neat to be able to fill out kind of the in-between, the cheap Powr-Kraft, the Powr-Kraft 100, and now essentially their mid-range half-inch drive ratchet. Anyway, really appreciate everybody who's been watching and subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Till next time, Catus Maximus out.